I've used the Oatly case to highlight why considering the IP dimension is important when creating a brand. Hello and welcome to the Brandtuned podcast, which discusses all things brand related, including the essential trademark and IP dimension. I'm your host, Shireen Smith, IP lawyer, brand manager, and author of Brandtuned, the new rules of branding, strategy, and intellectual property. I can't quite believe we've actually reached the 100th episode. I started the podcast back in May 2020 because I wanted to write a book about branding. To do so, I wanted to understand what's involved to create a brand and who to interview for the book. It wasn't obvious to me. I was coming at the subject as an IP lawyer who registers trademarks and protects brands. So I was seeing the problems that arise when brands are created without IP input. For example, I've recently blogged about the Oatly and Glebe Farms case to highlight the importance of considering the brand protection dimension when choosing names. Also, something I didn't actually mention in my blog is that being called a bully sits poorly for a purpose-driven brand that promotes health and environmental consciousness. Oatly found itself in a legal dispute with a competitor whose ethos was similar to its own. The legal action alienated consumers who questioned what the similarity was between the two products, Pure Oatly and Oatly. A petition called for Oatly to cease action against Glebe Farm, accusing it of rather aggressively and wholly unnecessarily targeting the British farm. Perhaps that's why Oatly didn't appeal the High Court's decision. Now, taking legal action is essential, though, because you need to enforce your trademark rights vigorously to protect your territory. For example, EasyJet comes down hard on any uses of the word easy. In my blog, I gave the example of someone using the name Pure Hellmann's to sell a mayonnaise product. Without doubt, that would infringe Hellmann's trademark. If instead of a name like Oatly, the company had a proper name like Hellmann's, it's unlikely consumers would question why it was taking action to defend its turf. So I would argue that a purpose-driven brand should choose a more distinctive name because that reduces the risk of competitors using similar branding. Ryanair needs to spend far less on brand protection than EasyJet does, simply because it's got a proper name. I've used the Oatly case to highlight why considering the IP dimension is important when creating a brand. IP is not just about doing searches and registering rights. As it baffled me why branding professionals didn't take account of IP during branding, I wanted to write a book on the subject. I could see so many reasons why IP would enable better brands to be created, yet there was this widespread misconception that IP is just about protecting whatever is created, that it doesn't impact the choice of brand element itself. Also, there is a widespread view that protection can neatly be left till later. even when new names are created, it's often left to the client to find a lawyer to do searches. It isn't explained to them that they might have to withdraw all their products and rebrand if they infringe on someone else's rights. Often, they're simply advised that it's important to protect their brand by registering a trademark. Naturally, if it's put like that, a client might well assume this is an optional extra, so might not bother to have any name searches carried out. The brand-tuned book is all about how to create a distinctive brand in line with the evidence-based research from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute into how brands grow. To celebrate its release on the 28th of September, we're hosting a virtual launch event with video interviews of key figures like Rory Sutherland, David Archer, and Rob Meyerson. There's also a summarized audio version of the book worth £20 available for free to those who register for the book launch and buy the book, the Kindle version of which will be available that day for a mere £1.99. So register at brandtuned.com. The link is in the show notes. One concern branding professionals have about lawyers getting involved is that the searches will identify problems which might entail the need to go back to the drawing board and start over. This frustration with the law is projected onto lawyers because the added constraints that IP presents is considered a nuisance, and typically people tend to blame the messenger. Now that I've finished writing the book, I've understood a lot more about brands and branding. Many of the problems I've observed are down to the lack of training branding professionals and marketers receive in IP. They're left to pick up the knowledge about IP that they need on their own as they go. It depends on their experience as to how and whether they learn about IP. Now, I'm hoping to change that by providing an accelerator training for designers and marketers. It's so important that they understand the legal concept of distinctiveness when creating new brands. And that means either working with lawyers or undergoing training to learn about legal distinctiveness. Training would give designers more independence to make better choices when creating new brands or brand identifiers, and to know when to suggest involving lawyers. Now that we're at the 100th episode, I want to celebrate the podcast, and rather than looking back on past episodes, as is often done on podcasts, I want instead to look forward to the future. That's why we're releasing several podcasts today. There's a Vox Pop about IP, which I recorded over a year ago. We're also releasing some recent interviews, such as with Somi Orion of FemPeak, whose purpose is to raise the socio-economic status of women. There's an episode with Thomas Kostler on creating a meaningful brand, and an interview I had nearly a year ago with Ian Paget, the host of the Logo Geek podcast. I'm hoping to cover design much more in future episodes. So I've lined up an interview with Steph Hammerlink of the Let's Talk Branding podcast, which will be released next week. And I'm looking to interview more designers who have incorporated the Ehrenberg Bass Institute's evidence-based research into their branding work. If you can suggest suitable designers for me to interview, please do get in touch. Okay, that's all for now. That's it for this week. Do subscribe to the brandtuned newsletter to get weekly updates. I'd also love to get your feedback. Just send me an email to info@brandtuned.com. Finally, if you liked the episode, please do share it with your friends and colleagues and review it on iTunes or whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you leave us a 5-star review, it means more people will listen and we can spread the word much more quickly about the podcast. Thank you and bye for now.